Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling something pretty huge and honestly super fascinating: the actual science behind building deep, meaningful friendships as an adult. And we're not just talking in generalities here. We are tailoring this as a highly practical playbook right here for our community at Riderwood Village. You know, if you've ever felt like making friends as an adult is just kind of a mystery, you are definitely not alone. But the good news? Science actually has some incredible, concrete answers for us.
So think back to when you were a kid for a second. It seemed like you could literally just walk up to someone on the playground, ask them if they liked the color blue, and boom, you were best friends for life, right? It felt completely effortless. Which begs the question, why does adult friendship often feel like this really complicated, high-stakes job interview? Why can we sometimes feel isolated, even when we're surrounded by wonderful, interesting people in our very own community?
Well, let's dive right into this. The absolute biggest myth we need to debunk right out of the gate is that adult friendships should just happen organically. They really don't. See, when we were kids, our friendships were largely driven by forced, organic proximity. We were literally put in the same classrooms, the same lunchrooms, day in and day out. In adulthood, that built-in infrastructure, it's basically gone. And research actually shows that people who believe friendship just happens passively, well, they tend to be lonelier over time. The reality is that adult friendships require strategic effort and truly intentional action.
To solve this, we're going to use a structured four-step playbook. 1. Engineering strategic proximity. 2. Overcoming role-limited interaction. 3. Constructive responding. And 4. Strategic self-disclosure.
Step 1. Engineering strategic proximity.
If we want to get back to those effortless feeling connections we had as kids, we have to deliberately recreate the environments that made them possible. Sociologists point to two vital concepts here. First, there's the proximity principle. This just means we naturally tend to form relationships with the people who are physically close to us. But, and this is a big but, physical closeness alone isn't enough. We also need what researchers call social foci. These are specific settings that provide constant, repeated, unplanned interactions. Just popping into a one-off happy hour won't really cut it. The mere exposure effect tells us that the more we see people, the more we like them. So we absolutely need repetition.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can hyper-localize the science right here at Riderwood. You have an incredible array of built-in social foci right outside your door. It could be joining the billiard buddies, regularly volunteering at the MST and TNC libraries, exploring with the geocaching club, heading to Saturday night at the movies, or joining the computer club. By committing to just one of these repeating groups, you are actively engineering that proximity required for a real bond to form.
As Executive Director Adam Smolik perfectly stated, in proximity is opportunity, and opportunity is proximity. Just showing up to a repeated social event is your crucial first opportunity. But you have to resist the temptation to physically show up only to mentally check out on your phone. You know what I mean? Be present and let that proximity do its initial work.
Step 2. Overcoming role-limited interaction.
Okay. So just because you play billiards with someone every Tuesday doesn't instantly mean you're close friends. We have to move past these superficial interactions that are based purely on our current social roles. Now, before you talk yourself out of engaging deeper with someone, you have to know about this fascinating psychological phenomenon called the liking gap. Research consistently finds that when strangers interact, they almost always underestimate how much the other person actually liked them. People are so terrified of rejection that they withdraw. But studies show that when you simply assume people like you, you naturally become warmer, friendlier, and just more open. It literally becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So assume the liking gap is in your favor. Which brings us to a really critical question, one that can honestly make or break a potential friendship. Who makes the first move? Think about it. If you're both waiting for the other person to reach out, nothing is ever going to happen. We have to completely relinquish this myth of passive friendship and just take the initiative. Be the one to extend the invitation.
So, the crucial point here is understanding the difference between role-limited interaction and actually moving toward friendship. Role-limited talk is superficial. It's contained entirely within the club or the library. Moving toward friendship happens when you essentially repot the relationship. That means making the first move to interact outside of that initial setting. It's as simple as saying, hey, would you like to grab a cup of coffee or dinner after computer club next week? That single invitation is the catalyst for a real friendship.
Step 3. Constructive responding.
All right, so you've engineered proximity, you've made the first move to get coffee, and now you're sitting right across from them. How do you actually build trust? Well, we often think we prove our friendship by being there for someone when times are tough, right? But surprisingly, psychological research reveals that how we respond to someone's good news is actually a way better predictor of long-term relationship success than how we respond to their bad news. We deeply want those around us to participate in our joy.
Positive psychologist Shelley Gable identified 4 main ways humans tend to respond to positive news: active constructive, passive constructive, active destructive, and passive destructive. A destructive response, as you might guess, either completely ignores the news or immediately points out the downsides. A passive constructive response might technically be positive, but it's super brief and dismissive. And research shows that only one of these 4 actually builds trust and brings people closer together.
Now let's actually hear what that sounds like in action. A passive constructive response sounds like, "Oh, wow, that's cool," followed by immediately changing the subject. It leaves the other person feeling totally disconnected. But active constructive responding, or ACR, sounds more like, "That's amazing, you totally deserve this, how do you feel?" It acknowledges the joy, it validates it, and it asks curious questions to keep that celebration going. It's a really profound experience that deepens our confidence in the relationship.
This entire dynamic is just beautifully captured by author John Joseph Powell, who wrote, "It is an absolute human certainty that no one can know his own beauty or perceive a sense of his own worth until it has been reflected back to him in the mirror of another loving, caring human being." When we practice active constructive responding, we are essentially offering that mirror to a new friend.
Step 4. Strategic self-disclosure.
So once trust and safety are established, how do we deepen the bond? Back in 1973, researcher Erwin Altman proposed the social penetration theory. This theory basically explains that as relationships develop, our communication has to move from shallow, superficial topics to more personal and intimate subjects. Think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion. Without this gradual deepening of topics, the friendship hits a hard ceiling and just remains an acquaintanceship.
Let's look at how this builds across our entire playbook so far. First, we started by sharing space, our proximity at the geocaching club or the library. Then we moved to sharing information, surface-level interests in humor during that first coffee outside the group. Finally, to truly cement the friendship, we must move to intimate disclosure. This means sharing our personal history, our joys, our vulnerabilities, and yes, even our fears.
It is so easy to think that we need to appear absolutely perfect to make friends, but science tells us the exact opposite is true. Vulnerability is what actually creates a powerful trust bond. Research confirms that the more intimately we disclose, the more liked we actually are. It signals to the other person that they are valued enough to hold your private information, which naturally encourages them to reciprocate and share their own inner world right back with you.
And that brings us to our conclusion. We have mapped out the entire journey from being strangers in a room to becoming true, reliable friends. The French writer François de La Rochefoucauld once observed, "A true friend is the greatest of all possessions and the one that we give least thought to acquiring." It is incredibly worth giving our friendships a great deal of thought. Deep connections are absolutely vital for our well-being, and as we've seen today, as adults, they do not happen by accident. They require our mindful effort, strategic action, and honestly, the courage to be vulnerable.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to carry with you. You have the science, you understand the steps, and you have an entire community of social foci waiting for you right outside your door. Who will you make the first move with at Riderwood today? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Now get out there, assume people like you, and start building those meaningful connections.